श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् दीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् ஆழ்வார் திருவடிகளே சரணம், எம்பெருமானார் திருவடிகளே சரணம், ஜீயர் திருவடிகளே சரணம். Today we are fortunate to be spending a little bit of time in listening and enjoying about the greatness of Swami Mamungal, whose 650th birth anniversary is during this year 2020 in the Aipasi month in the Indian calendar, Moola Nakshatram. Before we listen to the contributions of Mamunigal, first I would like to take the readers to the medieval times. The time when Srirangam was in complete danger, when Srirangam was destroyed by medieval conquerors from North India. This is the year 1323. During this time, the Delhi Sultanate was ruling North India, and Ulugh Khan, who later on became the king, he, with a big army, he came down south. He defeated many kingdoms on the way, and then he came to Srirangam through the northern entrance of Srirangam, and they laid waste to Srirangam. The temple was completely destroyed, completely. 12,000 Sri Vaishnavas are said to have perished during this time, killed by the invading army, according to our traditional texts. The Garbhagrahas of Perumal and Tayar were walled up using brick walls so that the Ranganatha Moolavar and Tayar Moolavar were hidden. One of the Tayar Moolavars is said to have been buried as well, so that the conquering army and the people who were head of the army, they did not discover that there was a Sannadhi to a deity there. Nambarumal, the Utsava Vigraha of Ranganatha, Lord Ranganatha, was taken away by Pillai Lokacharya and a few other followers. Pillai Lokacharya was the senior Acharya of those times. He was close to 118 years old at that point in time. And then he, along with a few others, took Ranganatha, Nambarumal, the Utsava Vigraha, and then they went down south. For 48 years, Lord Ranganatha did not come back. He went to south, and then he went to Kerala, and then he went to Tirumala. He was there in Tirumala for many years. And then the Vijayanagara ruler sent an army to conquer Srirangam and Madurai back. The conquering army had installed a sultanate in Madurai that lasted for 48 years. And even there in Madurai, the place was completely destroyed. One has to see the historical records to see the depth of destruction that happened to Madurai and of course Srirangam at that point in time. Vedanta Desika, who was probably about 60 years old at that time, he saved the Sutta Prakasika Grantha. During olden times, the Sutta Prakasika Grantha, the commentary on Sri Bhashyam, was present on palm leaf manuscripts. Maybe only a few copies existed. And whatever copy existed in Srirangam, Vedanta Desika saved it, and then he saved the two sons of Shuddha Prakasika Bhattar, the person who wrote Shuddha Prakasika, and then he went west to a place called Satyakal. Pillai Lokacharya took Nambarumal down, and then near Madurai, in a place called Jyotishkudi, Pillai Lokacharya left this earthly body and then went to Paramapadam to do Kainkaryam to Lord Srimanarayana there. And then a few others took Nambarumal down, and then they saved him for the next 40 years or so before he came back. The entire town of Srirangam was destroyed, given that all the scholars and all the elders either were dead or the junior among them, they had moved to different places throughout South India, wherever they could get safety. The Sampradaya was in a bad state at that point in time. Primarily because the capital, the was basically destroyed, and all the books and the learning and the patashalas and the parampara was lost in Srirangam at that point in time. Of course, the Sampradaya did continue to exist in pockets, like Tirumala, for example, right? It continued under the supervision of Tirumala Periyajiya Swami, who was installed by Ramanuja. Similarly, other Jiya Swamis installed by Ramanuja in different places, they continued propagation of Sampradaya in those places, like Melkote, for example, or Tirukurungudi was going fine, and so on. But in those days, if you recall or if you think back, it was not the days of the internet where everything was available easily. Communication was really difficult. And somebody who wanted to learn something had to seek an acharya, go there, be physically present with the acharya and then learn. And given a bulk of the acharyas were either gone or had spread away, the propagation of the Sampradaya had some difficulty at that point in time. It was in grave danger. And as we saw before, the Srirangam temple was destroyed and nothing was happening in the temple for 48 years. After 48 years, right, around 1371, Srirangam was restored, Namperumal came back, and slowly the festivals and slowly the Sampradaya began to reclaim its roots in Srirangam. This was the time when Manavala Mamuni was born. He was born down south near Tirunelveli, near Alvar Tirunagari is where he was born. In the meantime, when Pillai was escaping with Namperumal, just before he passed away, he had told his Sishyas to keep an eye on Thiruvaimozhi Pillai, who was doing service in the Pandya king at that time, who also must have escaped Madurai, and he probably was ruling, rural areas at that point in time. Because he was from the Sampradaya and Pillai Lokacharya wanted him to take charge of the Sampradaya. So Pillai Lokacharya's Sishyas taught Thiruvaimozhi Pillai the Sampradaya basics, and Thiruvaimozhi Pillai went to Alvar Tirunagari, restored Alvar Tirunagari, which was overcome with forests, and he trained Manavala Mamunigal also and gave him some commands, particularly to spread the Tamil works of our Sampradaya. Because the Sanskrit works were prevalent at that point in time in multiple places, and Ramanuja and his followers went to great lengths to establish the Tamil works, the Ubaya Vedanta, the Tamil portion of it in Srirangam, and it was lost because of these 48 years of occupation, and hence they wanted Pillai Lokacharya's Sishyas pass that on to Thiruvaimozhi Pillai, who then gave the order to Manavala Mamuni to spend the bulk of his efforts in spreading the Tamil works so that the Ubaya Vedanta can be saved. This is the time frame. Basically, Srirangam was limping back to normalcy, but the glory of the olden days were still not present. Lot of the commentaries were not prevalent because of the dispersal that happened. Some commentaries were lost. For example, Periyavachan Pillai's commentary on Periyarvar Tirumozhi, it was lost. And the entire environment was such that there was no single unifying leader of the Sampradaya. After Ramanuja, Embar, Bhattar, Nanjiyar, Nambillai, Vadakku Tiruvidi Pillai and Pillai Lokacharya, they were the leaders in Srirangam and hence the entire Sampradaya at that point in time. And then there was this gap of 48 years where there was no senior Acharya in Srirangam, and Thiruvaimozhi Pillai was in Alvar Tirunagari. So there really was a gap in the leadership of the Sampradaya at that point in time. Vedanta Desika had passed away to Sri Vaikuntham, had gone to Sri Vaikuntham just before Namperumal came back to Srirangam. So even he was not in the picture at that point in time. And hence this void was present, and it is this void that Manavala Mamunigal filled in terms of leadership of the Sampradayam, in terms of contributions to various aspects of the Sampradayam, that restored the glory of the Sampradayam in Srirangam and elsewhere as we see it today. This is the background in which one has to understand the contributions of Manavala Mamunigal. Now let us enjoy some of his contributions in key areas. Manavala Mamuni was born in 1370. So he must have reached Srirangam probably around late 1390s or 1400. Around that time is what I would suspect he would have reached Srirangam, after having been prepared by Thiruvaimozhi Pillai, and he did all kinds of kainkarias. Now we know how Srirangam is today. We see that Srirangam is again the center of Sri Vaishnava universe. with a lot of learning, patashalas, lot of utsavas to Lord Ranganatha. It is the place that we all desire to be in and we all desire to visit all the time. Contrast that with Srirangam as a ghost town during the time when Nambarumal was not there and it was just getting back in shape before Manavala Mamunigal came. That is the first major contribution of Manavala Mamuni, which is to restore Srirangam back to its great glory so that the center of Sri Vaishnava universe is at its right place in society. Now, his contributions can be in multiple angles. We will see it in different viewpoints. First, let us see his literary contributions, Manavala Mamuni's literary contributions. As I previously shared, he was ordered by his Acharya, Thiruvayamozhi Pillai, to propagate the Tamil branch of the Ubaya Vedanta. So Manavala Mamunigal did the following things. First of all, the commentary on Periyarvar Tirumozhi that was written by Periyavachan Pillai was lost. The majority of it was lost. Up to the 5th pattu of Periyarvar Tirumozhi, it was lost up to a specific pasuram. Manavala Mamunigal wrote commentary starting from Vannavadangal Sool all the way to that pasuram from which Periyavachan Pillai's Vyakyanam was available. In fact, he stopped his commentary at the exact word after which Periyavachan Pillai's commentary was available. That is a great upakaram that he did by putting in writing whatever he learned from his acharyas about Periyarvar Tirumozhi so that the great meanings given to us was not lost. The second thing he did was he wrote commentaries on great Rahasya Granthas. Pillai Lokacharya had written 18 Rahasya Granthas. That was the culmination, that is the summary and the summum bonum of the entire Sri Vaishnava tradition. The Vaidika tradition and the Sri Vaishnava tradition is contained in these 18 Rahasyas. Out of that, there are 3 major Rahasyas: Mumukshupadi, Tattvatrayam and Sri Vachana Bhushanam. These are magnum opuses. And Manavala Mamuni wrote a wonderful commentary on each one of them. That is available even today, that is being studied by people and that is being followed by people. In addition to that, Manavala Mamuni wrote a commentary on Acharya Hridayam, a magnificent work that was written by Azhage Manavala Perumal Nayanar, the brother of Pillai Lokacharya. Other than these commentaries, he also wrote Upadeshatthanamalai and Thiruvayamai Nootrandadi, 2 Tamil works. Thiruvayamai Nootrandadi is probably the most magnificent poem. Each verse, there are 100 verses, each verse conveys the meaning of one Thiruvayamozhi. There are 100 Thiruvayamozhis, right? Each verse in Thiruvayamai Nootrandadi conveys the meaning perfectly of each Thiruvayamozhi. And beautifully, the first word in Thiruvayamai Nootrandadi for that verse will be the first word that is present in that pattu in that Thiruvayamozhi. So not only was it poetically magnificent, but from a conveying meaning perspective, it is a magnificent work. Upadeshatthanamalai is a very special work. Now we know how Ramanuja worked really hard and faced lot of trouble in establishing the works of Alvars and the Ubaya Vedanta tradition in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. Of course, Srimad Nadamunigal introduced it and then he established Arayar post in order to propagate the Nalayana Divya Prabandham, and it came to Ramanuja and so on. However, Ramanuja and subsequent Acharyas had to undergo a lot of opposition to establish the Tamil Vedanta in the Dravida Vedanta in the Sri Vaishnava tradition. Now with these 60-70 years of troubles in Srirangam, one could assume that probably that tradition was lost a little bit and somebody had to re-establish it. And that is what Manavala Mamunigal did, of course. This Upadeshatthanamalai is a magnificent work that tells us the greatness of the Alvars, that tells us their birthplaces, their birth Tirunakshatrams, tells us what they wrote, and it talks a lot about Sri Vachana Bhushanam and how a Sri Vaishnava should live. And that is a Upadesa Grantha. That is why it is called Upadesa Ratnamalai. It is a fantastic work that is there in Nityanusandhanam in all of our houses. Other than this, Manavala Mamunigal wrote Yatiraja Vimshati, which is short and sweet 20 shloka poem on Ramanuja, a really beautiful shloka. And he wrote multiple Mangalams and Mukta Shlokam and things like that. So this is his literary contribution in terms of original works that he wrote. Oh, I forgot one thing. He also added the Pramana Tirattu for Eid. For Eid Vyakyanam is very big, and there will be references from Vedas, from Upanishads, from Smriti, Itihasa Puranas and Diva Prabandham and everywhere present in the Eid Vyakyanam. Manavala Mamunigal compiled the Pramana Tirattu, where he ensured that reference can be linked to the original text so that people can understand where that reference came from and then go read the reference fully if they wanted to. While doing all these things, Manavala Mamunigal did it in such a way that he is known as Uyilada Manavala Mamuni or Vishada Vakshigamani. His scholarship and his truth in representation was such that we call him that Manavala Mamuni who has no blemish, Manavala Mamuni who has no lie in the works that he wrote. One should read some of the works to know how faithful he was to what our Purvacharya said and how beautifully he has compiled those Vyakyanams. The next angle we will see is Manavala Mamuni's role in spreading the Ubaya Vedanta tradition. Of course, we saw the great works that he wrote and the commentaries that he wrote for many of the works. In addition to that, one of the key things that Manavala Mamuni did is the Eid Vyakyanam, the Vyakyanam on Tiruvayumozhi that was dictated by Nambillai and written by Vadakku Tiruvedi Pillai, that was lost. I wouldn't say lost, that was actually hidden with only one or two people. And Tiruvayumozhi Pillai had gotten that from that parampara. Manavala Mamunigal had learnt that, and he wanted to ensure that Eid Vyakyanam was available to everyone. So for 1 year in Srirangam, he called everybody and then he gave the Upanyasam or the Kalakshepam on the Eid Vyakyanam. He popularized Tiruvayumozhi and Eid Vyakyanam. For 1 year, it is said that there were no functions that were happening in the temple of Srirangam. Everybody came to listen to the Eid Vyakyanam, and the entire town was completely engrossed in it. And on the day of the Satramurai, something magical happened, which we will see a few minutes later. So that is his great contribution, to ensure that Tiruvayumozhi, Alvar's thinking, Tiruvayumozhi, Alvar's Pasurams, and the Vyakyanam given by Nampillai and written by Vadakku Tiruvedi Pillai on Tiruvayumozhi was popularized to everyone. That is the second big contribution of Manavala Mamuni. Now, for somebody to be held in great regard as Manavala Mamuni, just the literary and the spreading contribution alone may not be enough, isn't it? Because we say Manavala Mamuni held as Apadavatara of Embrumanar. Our sources say that Embrumanar himself, Ramanuja himself, was born as Manavala Mamuni. So what else did he do? Now, one of the key things a leader of a sampradaya does is to have great sishyas, is to prepare great sishyas and have great sishyas who actually can spread in a very distributed way the great truths that sampradaya knows to be true. People who bring more people into the fold, who guide people who are in the fold, and who ensure that the greatness and the great messages of the sampradaya is propagated completely. Now we know in Ramanuja's life that Ramanuja had so many sishyas, so many GS. It is said that Ramanuja had a following of 700 sannyasis and thousands of sishyas. Now after Ramanuja, if we see somebody with so many sishyas, one can say it is Manavala Mamuni only. And I will give a couple of examples. So Manavala Mamunigal had a group of Shishyas known as Ashtadiggajas. These were the closest Shishyas that Manavala Mamuni had. Those Ashtadiggajas included sannyasis and non-sannyasis. The 8 people were Vanavamalai Jiyar. The Vanavamalai Matham was formed by this Jiyar. Vanavamalai Jiyar, Pattangi Paravastu Bhattarbiran Jiyar, Tiruvengada Jiyar. This is the Chinnajiyar Mat in Tirumala. Koil Kandadayan, Prativadi Bayangaram Manna, Yerumbiappa, Appillai and Appillan. Now here it's important to note the greatness of the people who were his Sishyas. Each one of these people were Acharyas, great Acharyas in their own right. Prativadi Bayangaram Anna, for instance, he was a great Sishya of Vedanta Deshika who was born in Kanchipuram. He is known as Prativadi Bayangara because he basically was somebody who was able to argue against other philosophies and establish our position. He was a fantastic student of Vedanta Deshika's son. And then he came to Srirangam. Prativadi Bayangaram Annan, in fact, probably was born in 1361, a little bit older than Manavala Mamuni himself. And then he came to Srirangam knowing the greatness of Manavala Mamuni, and he surrendered to Manavala Mamuni and he became his Sishya as well. Such is the greatness of Manavala Mamuni. In fact, Prativadi Bayangaram Annan is the one who wrote Suprabhatam and Venkateshwara Prapatti that is being recited every day in Tirumala, and there in 2 slokas he beautifully talks about the greatness of Manavala Mamuni. He says, Srimat Sundara Jamatru Munimanasa Vasine Sarvaloka Nivasaya Srinivasaya Mangalam. He says that, O Srinivasa, Mangalam to you, who is the Sarvaloka Nivasa. He lives, Lord Srinivasa lives in the mind, in the mind of Sundara Jamatru Muni, who is Manavala Mamuni. In the Venkateshwara Prapatti, he says, Saumyopayantru Munina Mama Darshitau Te Padau Sri Venkatesha Sharanau Sharanam Prapadye. He says that Saumyopayantru Muni, Manavala Mamuni is the one who showed him the lotus feet of Lord Srinivasa. So such great Acharya is Prativadi Bayangaram Annan, and he voluntarily accepted the Acharyaship, voluntarily accepted Manavala Mamuni as his own Acharya. Similarly, Yerumbiappa was somebody who is a learned person who had a different attitude, and then he became a Sishya of Manavala Mamuni. Similar to Ashtadiggajas, there is also Navaratnas. There are 9 people who are mentioned there. It is important to note that the people who came and became Sishyas of Manavala Mamuni came from all over the place. They were not restricted to a specific geography. For example, Yerumbiappa came from a place near Sholingar in North Tamil Nadu. He came to Srirangam. Of course, Prativadi Bayangaram Annan came from Kanchipuram. If you look at Vanavamalai Jiyar, he went to Vanavamalai, which is in deep south, to establish the Vanavamalai. Similarly, among the Navaratnas, there is a person called Ettur Singaracharya. Ettur Singaracharya or Ettur Immadi Singaracharya also we can say. He was a descendant of Periya Tirumala Nambi who was present in what is current day Andhra early on. And then, given that he was a descendant of Periya Tirumala Nambi, he knew Ramayana and Ramayana Arthas very well through his own parampara, through his father, grandfather and so on. And he became a very known person, and he became an influential person in the Vijayanagara kingdom. Virupaksha was the king at that point in time. So, Ettur Singaracharya, he came to Manavala Mamuni, he became a Sishya, and he learnt Rahasya Granthas and Eid from Manavala Mamuni. This is present in a Grantha called Periya Tirumudiyadaivu. So this shows that Manavala Mamuni was somebody who was able to attract Sishyas from all over the place, and these were Acharyas by their own right with lot of influence, and they accepted Manavala Mamuni as their Acharya. You can imagine a parallel. Kurat Talwan, Mudaliyandan, great Acharyas who accepted Ramanuja as their own Acharya, and then together with Ramanuja, they propagated and they made Sri Vaishnavism flourish. Same thing happened with Malavala Mamuni, with all the people that I mentioned, and lot more people that I haven't mentioned because of lack of time. So that is the next angle that I wanted to talk to you about. The ability to have wonderful Sishyas who were Acharyas in their own right, and then propagating the message to everyone without any discrimination. The next angle in terms of contribution of Manavala Mamuni is through his own practice, Anushtanam. Now Manavala Mamuni's life, if we look at it, is a wonderful life of Kainkaryam, service that he did. He has gone to many places. He had done Punaruddharana, Jirnodharana of many places. And of course, he restored Srirangam to its original glory. And he wrote all these granthas. And he re-established the greatness of Sri Vaishnava community. During this time, one would imagine he had encountered all kinds of people. People who were friendly towards him, people who probably were jealous of him, people who did not like him, all those things. However, there is one beautiful thing. It is said that Manavala Mamuni never in his entire life did anything that caused hurt to anyone else in his entire life. In fact, in Arti Prabandham, he says, "Oh, Ramanuja, one of the greatness that you have blessed me with is, I have lived a life such that there is nobody who has been jealous of me." Now, it is easy for people not to be jealous of somebody who is not great. But for somebody as great as Manavala Mamuni, for no one to have jealousy upon him, just shows how graceful and how kind and how soft Manavala Mamuni was throughout his life. His Anushtanams can be seen from the Purva Dinacharya and Uttara Dinacharya. After all, he was Manavala Mahamuni. He was a Muni, just like Shadagopa Muni, Srivanatha Muni, and like Ramanuja Muni, right? He is a Muni. Muni is Mananashilaha. He's always thinking about Perumal all the time. Always thinking about sattvic things all the time. Never hurting anybody. Always thinking about good for the world and his Sishyas. That also comes through very clearly in many of the things that he did. In fact, it is said that Manavala Mamuni's lips were always moving because he was reciting the Dvaya Mantra all the time, and he was having the anubhava of the meaning of the Dvaya Mantra in his mind while he was reciting the Dvaya Mantra all the time. That is his Anushtanam, that is his practice. He showed to us what proper practice is for a Sri Vaishnava. One should not hurt others. One should always have the Dvaya Mantra in our mind. One should always have Loka Hitam in mind. One should behave in such a way that nobody is jealous of us. That is one of the aspects of his contributions to us, greatness, from which we can get inspired by. Now the last angle that I would like to present with respect to Manavala Mamuni's contributions is the acceptance of Manavala Mamuni by Lord Sriman Narayana himself. Now, we talked about Eid and how for 1 year Manavala Mamuni gave the Upanyasam, the Kalakshepam of Eid Vyakhyanam to everybody in Srirangam, and how everybody came to his Kalakshepam and listened, and how the temple did not have any functions throughout the year. Other than daily activities, the temple did not have any major festivals during that year because everything was dedicated to this Eid Vyakhyanam. On the last day of Eid Vyakhyanam, the Satumarai, Lord Ranganatha himself came in the form of a small boy, and he gave the Thaniyan to us that we recite every day. He wrote a Thaniyan on Manavala Mamuni. Sri Shailesa Dayavatram Dhivaktyadi Gunarnamam Yatindra Pravanam Mande Ramya Jamataram Munim. He wrote that to him, for him, and he presented that in the assembly. And from that time onwards, that Thaniyan had been accepted because Lord Ranganatha himself had written the Thaniyan, and because of that Ranganatha had become the Sishya of Manavala Mamuni. Now, after this incident happened, a patolai, they say, a missive, a letter went to all the Vedesams. This is present in Koiluru, that is the scripture from which I am quoting, that this incident happened, and from now on, everywhere anything is being recited, the Taniyan Sri Shailasataya Patram should be recited in the beginning. That letter went everywhere, and that is how the Taniyan of Sri Shailasataya Patram is now part of our daily recitation for any religious and spiritual activity that we do. Now, Ranganatha accepted him as his Acharya, isn't it? Even to this day, we can see Ranganatha honoring him as Acharya. On his birthday, Aipasil Tirumulam, on his birth Tirunakshatram. Usually in Srirangam, all Alvars and Acharyas go to, their Vigraha is taken, they go to Nambarumal and Periyaperumal Sannadhi, and then they get Bahumana, or they get the respects, they do Mangala Sasanam, and they get respects from Manavala, from Lord Ranganatha. Bahumanam, gifts are given on behalf of Nambarumal to them. But for Manavala Mamuni does not go to Nambarumal. The gifts are sent by Nambarumal. Even today, after the Periyavasaram, or after the daily activities are done, the prasadam and bahumanam, the garlands and chandana and things like that, they are carried by the chief priest of Ranganatha temple, and then he comes and then he gives them, he submits them to Manavala Mamuni in Manavala Mamuni's Sannadhi. Similarly, during Manavala Mamuni's Tiruvadhyanam, we say, the day in which he ascended to Sri Vaikuntham, it is the duty of Sishya to perform certain rituals for Acharya. Even to this day, Nambarumal sends certain things to Manavala Mamunihal on the day every year, on the anniversary when Manavala Mamuni ascended to Paramapadam. This way, we can clearly understand that Manavala Mamuni's contributions were accepted, and he was accepted by Lord Ranganatha himself. And that is one angle of his contribution. So now, because of all these reasons, because of the wonderful contributions that Manavala Mamuni did, the Pasuram we recite every day during Sattumarai, everywhere they recite, is this: Adiyargal Vaazha, Aranganagar Vaazha, Shadagopan Tantamilnul Vaazha, Kadal Zurunda Mandulaham Vaazha, Manavala Mamuniye Innavar Nuttandirum. It says, Adiyargal Vaazha, for all the Sri Vaishnavas to flourish. Aranganagar Vaazha, for Srirangam to flourish. Shadagopan Tantamilnul Vaazha, for Tiruvayamuri and the Nalaya Deva Prabandham to flourish. Kadal Zurunda Mandulaham Vaazha, for the entire universe to flourish. For that, O Manavala Mamuni, you please live for 100 more years. That is the Pasuram we recite every day, isn't it? And that sums up the greatness of Manavala Mamunihal for us. After Ramanuja, Manavala Mamunihal was the Acharya who re-established Sri Vaishnavam after a bad period that it went through. And he had so many Sishyas, he had so many contributions to our Sri Vaishnava Sampradayam, that even to this day, for us, our daily practices begin with remembering him, using Sri Shailasataya Patram Taniyan, and end with Adiyargal Vaazha Ranganagar Vaazha. So we start and finish with Manavala Mamunihal every day. That is the greatness of Manavala Mamuni. Alvar Tiruvadigalé Sharanam, Emberumanar Tiruvadigalé Sharanam, Jiyar Tiruvadigalé Sharanam.